Okay, so we have about 85% of the audience. I think we can end the poll and share the results. So as we can see, the majority of our audience are master's students. So I'll share that information. The panelists can see this, correct? So you can see the audience. All right, so thank you everyone. And we are introducing some of the organizers here. Okay, today my name is Rosa Chang. I am just the host for today, and then we also have Alicia Booker, who is the career advisor and she works in career and talent development at FIU. And of course, last but not least, it's Eric, and he'll be moderator today. So I will pass it on to Eric.
Thank you, Dr. Chang, for that. And we have the next slide with our panelists. We'll paste their biographies in the chat and give them a brief introduction. All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Eric. I'm the Associate Director of FIU in Washington, D.C., reporting to you live from the nation's capital right now. We have our beautiful home in Washington behind me here. It is my pleasure to provide conversation with 4 panelists who have some great opportunities that are particularly amazing for graduate students here today. I'll introduce them each briefly, but their full bios are uploaded to our website, which I just put in the chat so you can learn a little bit more about them beyond what I'll introduce them with here. But we have Brandon Jacobson, who is representing the Presidential Management Fellows Program, which is out of the Office of Personnel Management. Alina Khan, who's representing TechCongress. Jessica Soul, who is representing the Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program at the AAAS, and Deborah Eichhorn, who's representing the Government Accountability Office, one of my favorite federal agencies, and I follow them and read all their reports on Facebook, by the way. So their panels, their information bios are in the chat there. I also want to, for those of you who are connecting with FIU in Washington, D.C. for the first time, since everyone in this call is interested in federal government and our team is here in Washington, my contact information is in the chat there if you reach out to me. That Talent Lab website goes to all the information that FIU in DC has on programs for students interested in Washington. Also have how you can subscribe to our newsletters with all the great internships and jobs, and for a cool event that we have coming up later this week. So moving on from that, we can, I think, move on from the, you want, Dr. Chang, did you need us to still talk about run of show or anything? We're good to go with questions right now, right?
Yeah, we're good to go. I'll stop sharing.
Good to go. So I'm going to have each panelist give just a very brief overview of their program, what it's all about, how it works, what its purpose is, and for everyone except for Deborah, what agencies are common placements, because the 3 other programs besides GAO might place you in different federal government agencies, and for Deborah at the GAO, what units or offices or programs within GAO might a graduate student be able to end up in no particular order. How about Alina first?
Awesome. Well, thank you first for having me, and thank you everybody for attending this session. We're really excited to just talk about the plethora of opportunities that are available. So a little bit about TechCongress. We are a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization that's based in Washington, D.C., and we run 2 fellowship programs. The first is the Congressional Innovation Fellowship, which is our mid-career program. And the second is our Congressional Innovation Scholars Program, which is our early career program. And our Scholars Program, I think, is particularly relevant for the audience that we have because it's our early career program. So a lot of our fellows are just finishing their master's or their PhD, or they have an undergraduate degree and a couple years of work experience. So we've had fellows, we recruit technologists and data analysts and engineers, and we place them on legislative teams in Congress in either personal offices or on committees, and they spend the duration of their fellowship advising on technology policy. And we are just promoting creating bridges between the technology community and the policymaking community. So we've had fellows placed in House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office, Senate Majority Whip John Thune's office, House Oversight Committee, the House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee, Senator Warren, Senator Paul, and we have a ton of alumni who have done really important work, such as passing the Open Government Data Act, which establishes a chief data officer at each executive agency. They've helped organize some of the first hearings on facial recognition. They've helped write the House Judiciary Antitrust Report on Big Tech. And they've just made incredible amount of impact. And what we're ultimately planning on doing is just creating a pipeline so that people are entering public interest tech sphere.
Thanks, Selena. And I know my fellow event organizers are having the students put their emails in the chat, but I'll ask all the panelists to also have ready any links that you want to share for students to actually apply to these programs. I know some of them are open now and other events are going on related to them. So we'll definitely have some chance for you to share the links to apply in the chat. Jessica, what about the Stpf Fellowship?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us this evening. I did not tell myself ahead of time. I'm going to try it right now. Keep me on track. So the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships Program, as its name suggests, is a program of AAAS. I'm wondering if in the chat box, or if you can raise your hand if you've heard of AAAS. It's the American Association for the Advancement of Science. We are the publishers of the journal Science. So if you've ever read the journal Science, if that is your jam, we're the publishers. But this fellowship brings doctoral level scientists and engineers to the federal government for a year. So it's nearing its 50th anniversary. We're actually recruiting right now for our 50th class, which is exciting. And so we place our fellows in either the executive branch agencies, congressional placements, or we have one judicial placement. And so the majority of our fellows are in executive branch agencies like the State Department, the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, EPA, NOAA, NASA. There's more than 20 agencies that our fellows go into. And so I won't name them all now, it's alphabet soup. But for a lot of scientists, you might be familiar with them as the funding agencies or regulators of science or research. Now, some of our fellows can renew for a second year. So if you ever meet a Stpf fellow who says they're a second year fellow, that's what we're talking about. And so our cohorts of fellows are more than 250 strong from year to year. Thinking back to our audience, I know some of you are pursuing PhDs, some of you are getting a master's. If you're getting a master's in engineering, that plus 3 years of professional experience in engineering could also qualify you for this fellowship. And if you think about this fellowship, it's not only for early career professionals. So if this is something you're interested in doing, but it makes sense for you later in your career, it's something you could put a pin in and return to us later as well. And then following the fellowship, our fellows, some of them stay in federal policy. We find that about half of our fellows do that. And then some also return back to academia or go into industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. I'd be remiss not to mention FIU's current AAAS fellow, Jason Bono. I just put a FIU News article in the chat about him and his research on wobbling muons. So we can learn about that. Brandon, what's PMF all about?
Hey, thanks, Eric. Nice to meet everybody. It's great to be here. So the Presidential Management Fellows Program is basically the way that the federal government recruits and develops the next generation of federal government leaders. It's been around since 1978, started by President Carter before most of us were alive. But since then, it's been the same sort of intent, which is to bring in folks out of grad school for a 2-year fellowship. And at the end of that 2-year fellowship, convert you to a full-time federal employee in the competitive service. The idea is that during that 2-year fellowship, you're getting training and development. You'll have a senior level mentor. You'll have an opportunity to go on rotation or detail to another agency, all with the intent of putting you on a leadership trajectory in government. So that's what it's all about. The blessing and the curse of the PMF program is that it's for folks from all academic disciplines. So whatever you can think of, and there's some interesting ones that have applied over the past, however many years, but no matter what your advanced degree is in, as long as you have an advanced degree, that's what qualifies you to apply. And our dates were actually announced yesterday. So Eric and his team timed this perfectly. So I'm just going to pop into the chat the link to our 2022 application page where you can find details on the upcoming application that launches in the fall. We've also got a bunch of info sessions that we're doing in September. Some of them are theme-based, so public health, cybersecurity, and a number of other ones. In terms of where fellows get placed, we work with over 100 federal agencies, so certainly all the cabinet level agencies, but some of the ones that are most sort of apt to use PMF are the State Department, USAID, USDA does a lot of hiring in PMFs, particularly in the Forest Service. We've also got a lot of folks from the Department of the Treasury, Transportation, and the other really big player these days is HHS. So this year we've already hired over 50 PMFs at the CDC for reasons that we all understand. So it's a great pathway and a way to launch your federal career, no matter what your background is. The two things that we're looking for are public service motivation and leadership potential. So those are the two things that our application really evaluates for. But that's kind of a snapshot of the PMF program.
Thanks, Brandon. To not make the first three panelists jealous, I won't say that I saved the best for last, but I did want to say I did want to separate the three fellowships that are multi-agency placements with the one standalone agency, GAO, which, fun fact, is part of the legislative branch of government. Deborah, what is GAO all about, and what opportunities do you have for graduate students?
Oh, thanks, Eric. It's great to be here today, to see you again, and to be talking with the FIU community. I've really enjoyed getting to know the community in a variety of ways, including having my own intern from FIU last year at GAO. So one, I want to say that I came into government as a presidential management intern before the fellows program. So I'm a super big fan of PMF program. You know, definitely apply. Even if you don't know what you want to do, put your name in the hat and follow all the advice Brandon gives you. It's a fabulous, fabulous program. So a little bit about GAO. As Eric said, we're a legislative branch agency. So we work for the Congress, and so contrast that with the executive branch, which is Department of Justice, the Health and Human Services, those departments. So we work directly for the Congress. We're a research organization. I think that's why we're such a good match, especially for public administration, political science, social science related degrees. And what we do is research. We, get asked either from members of Congress, their committees, or sometimes it's part of legislation to look at how are our public policies working? Are they working as originally designed? Is all the funds that went out for COVID relief being spent as it was specified in the legislation? So we have access to all the data and have authority to look at programs across anything that federal money is spent on, even if it's indirectly spent, through grants. We have the authority to go in and audit, analyze the results of those programs. So GAO is celebrating its 100th year centennial this year. So we have a lot of activities going on. Keep an eye on our websites, our Facebook. And we are also recently named, just to do a little more bragging of GAO, as one of the #1 place to work for mid-size agencies. We're consistently in the top 3, and we've been #1 for quite a while in our support of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in terms of opportunities for graduate students, the biggest opportunity we have are our internships. And we run our internships all year round, like three different ones. We have a fall, summer, and spring internship. And the only thing you have to be, the main thing you have to be to qualify for them is an enrolled student. So you have to always be a student during the program. And we actually have 4 different paid internships. One is this general analyst positions that do the auditing of those federal programs I just talked about, applying your critical thinking skills, your excellent writing skills, other teamwork skills. That's what you would do in that internship. Then we have another internship that's similar, but it's program and management internships. So those are for interns in offices at GAO that support the functions of GAO. So like in my office, coming from the human capital perspective. So we are supporting hiring and recruiting, folks within GAO. We have those kinds of internships in our congressional relations office or our IT office, all the offices and staff offices that support the internal operations of GAO. And then we also have 2 other internships that are more, specific and do have some specific academic requirements. And one is our IT auditor, and those folks work in our information technology and cybersecurity team. And then we have another one that's a financial auditor. So those are folks coming with some level of accounting experience. We do have an entry-level program as well, the more kind of equivalent to the recent grads program, but we don't open that up very often because we use our internship program as our vehicle to bring in entry-level folks. Like the PMF, you can convert to a permanent position without additional competition, assuming we have spots available and assuming it all worked out. And that's where we hire most of our entry level folks. But last year we did, or in the spring, we did have our first entry level announcement where you don't have to be a current student to apply. And I don't expect another one of those open for at least another year or so, which might align okay with your plans as students, but the biggest avenue in is through the intern program.
Thanks, Deborah. I want to take a second to acknowledge there's 83 people on this call right now, and that's so meaningful to me in terms of the interest that the FIU community has in public service and the federal government. So for each of the panelists, now that you've sold these 83 individuals on applying to your programs, what secret tip do you want to tell them that these 83 people won't share with anyone else about how they can be the most competitive? You shared a little bit about the purpose, who it's for, people from these majors, or people from these public service orientation. I know Brandon mentioned. So what can these FIU students do to be the most competitive? That might not be the initial obvious thing that's right at the top of the website. It doesn't have to be a true secret to get you in trouble, but how can they be most competitive? Jessica?
Ooh, I'm in the hot seat first. Okay. It's a great question. I would say that I would like to think we don't have secrets that we would keep from folks, but I think that sometimes there's this preconception that because we have policy in the title, that you need to already be a policy wonk in order to apply for this type of a fellowship. And I think that that's not the case. This is really meant to be a fellowship where somebody who is interested in policy, but not an expert, can come and spend a year for public service and learning. And so that would be my biggest tip, is if you are interested in learning more about this or wonder what it is and you aren't an expert already, that's great. We're for you. And don't count yourself out. Apply if you're interested.
Awesome. Thank you. Brandon?
Thanks, Eric. So I'm going to share 2. The first is that this year we have one central resource that we're pointing applicants to in order to understand the application process, and that's the Pmf Applicant Handbook. We used to have several that were hard to find in different parts of the website, et cetera. But this year it's all in one place. So my first piece of advice would be read that thing from cover to cover. It's only 24 pages. It's longer, shorter than a lot of journal articles probably. So just read that thing thoroughly. It outlines everything you need to know, as well as some of the common mistakes and pitfalls that folks encounter sometimes with the application. So that would be my first piece of advice. And then the second one kind of is a secret because I don't think a lot of people utilize this because it's relatively new, which is we have a directory of what are called Pmf Ambassadors on our website. And those are folks that have signed up to assist with our recruitment and outreach, and they're PMFs and PMF alumni themselves. And so what you can do is go to the page in the link that I just posted there, and you can pull up that directory and you can search by degree background, by duty location, by a number of different factors, and then just email these people and schedule conversations. They've signed up to support in getting talented, amazing folks like yourselves into government. And so I think that's a resource because it's new that people haven't caught on to yet. So you can be early adopters and use that directory and have valuable conversations depending on what your background is. Those would be my 2 tips.
Thanks, Brendan. Quick programming note. I've seen some students have questions already. I'm monitoring the chat for questions. I would like, once we get past one more question, for students who are not at work or something like that to be able to ask questions directly. So what I want students who have questions to do is go ahead and type the actual question in the chat. Depending on how much time we have and if questions are similar, I might read some of them or combine some of them, but I also might call on you. So go ahead and put the questions in the chat. We'll get to them. If you are somewhere like you're at work, but you're so eager to tune in and you can't read it out loud, make a note of that and I'll just read it for you. And we'll get to some questions pretty soon. Deborah, how about how your candidates can be competitive?
I think I want to, build on, I don't know if Brandon or Jessica mentioned it, but it had to do, I think it was Brandon, about reading carefully. And that is any federal job application or announcement, including GAOs, sort of the secret sauce is in that announcement. And in it, it will lay out sort of the responsibilities that person will have, the type of skills that they're looking for in a lot of detail. And so you want to make sure that you read through that, even force yourself through all the bureaucratic language that's there to find that it's there and read it from start to finish for a couple reasons. One is it'll tell you what we're looking for. And so you want to make sure that in your application and on your federal resume that you highlight those skills really and experiences really as clearly as you possibly can. If it says, which of course it won't, we need someone who has a gray sweater, you don't go in there and say, I own a black sweater or a yellow sweater. I mean, you just say, I have a gray sweater and here's how you can kind of prove it. So if it's saying it wants a specific skill, just say that you can't just say you have the skill, but say the skill and then explain more, demonstrate through examples where you got that skill from, the extent of that skill, what you've accomplished with that skill, any challenges you had, as you develop that skill. I mean, all of that kind of information, and just make sure that the resume and any answers to questions, assessment questions you include, you cover all of those areas. And the other thing is, a number of people get deemed ineligible. Their applications are deemed ineligible because they didn't include all the information that was requested. And I think Brandon referred to this too. Either they wanted official transcripts, or it didn't, or certain kinds of transcripts, you didn't include those, or it needed proof that you were currently a student, or there's a few things like that. The documents are required. So just make sure that you have all those materials available ahead of time and at your fingertips, and don't rule yourself out because of administrative reasons. So be very, read again. That's all spelled out really clearly, and there's often email addresses that you can respond, email if you have specific questions about your application.
Thanks, Deborah. And Alina?
Yeah, well, I would love to highlight 2 things. I think the first thing, I'm just going to kind of echo what Jessica was saying about policy experience. We find that a lot of people don't apply for a fellowship because they have imposter syndrome, or they don't have policy experience, and they're like, how am I qualified to work in Congress on legislative staff and help these members make decisions? But the thing is that Congress needs your expertise. They need tech experts. There are so many staffers in Congress, and at our best estimate, there's only about 20 or less who are technologists. And something that we found is very helpful is we have a variety of recruitment events where you can talk to current fellows, and I bet 95% of them will also say they had imposter syndrome coming in. We do have a 3-week orientation at the outset. A lot of programs only have a couple of days, but we have 3 weeks where we teach those tactical skills that you need. Even if you never did policy before, we start with how a bill becomes a law and how it moves through Congress, how to write a memo, how to plan a hearing. And these are all skills that you'll need when you go into the office. So you'll go in knowing what to do from day one. And so that's something that I would love to highlight. I think I majored in political science, and I like to say I learned more practical information in our orientation than I did in one semester of legislative politics. And then the second thing I would highlight is that we need people who are good translators. You know, it's not enough to just know the material, it's enough to be able to communicate it. Why is it important? What are the consequences of it? How do I connect it to this event that just happened? Just a tip in our application is we have like a policy essay, and we really encourage people to, you know, use that essay to demonstrate their skills, their translation skills. You know, you can explain what end-to-end encryption is to someone, but maybe, you know, throw in a metaphor so that they understand, you know, okay, well, it's like putting a letter in a sealed envelope and only you and the recipient can read it, versus like you have a postcard and you're just hoping no one reads it, you know, stuff like that. Demonstrating what those skills are in your application is really important.
Thanks, Lena. I'm going to start transitioning to some student questions. I do have 2 more staged if we get to them, but there are some fantastic questions in the chat. And I wanted to see, because I would love for you all to see and hear some FIU students. So we'll see if any are available to ask their questions out loud, and some of them I'll read. But I know, Ashley, you had a question specifically about the GAO. Are you available to ask that to Deborah?
Hi, Eric. Yes, I am. Unfortunately, I will not be able to turn on the camera. I'm currently nursing my baby, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you all for providing us with this phenomenal information. Ms. Deborah, I wanted to ask, are research teams assigned, are those topics assigned to analysts based on their backgrounds, or are they randomly assigned, or how does that process work?
That's a great question, Ashley. For the internships, I think it's a combination. I mean, I think where they can make matches where they, you know, with someone's skill or, you know, policy area background, if you're interested in healthcare or the environment or international affairs, I think they will try to make that match, but there's only so many spots available on any given team. And what happens if you got a permanent position at GAO, the first 2 years you're at GAO, you rotate between 3 different teams, and the teams cover different policy areas. And they're, I think we lay them out on our website. So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of where we need people, because we want to staff you where we need the help, and also taking advantage of your expertise or interest that you bring to the table.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to combine a few and then also call on some more people. I also wanted to point out, I don't know if he's still here. I noticed Juan said he loves science and had his hand up earlier. Juan, if you still have a question, let me know in the chat so I can call on you as well. A few different students asked about US citizenship, which is common in this type of event. And we know that with some exceptions, work in the federal government is typically limited to US citizens, though I appreciate Brandon posting some information in the chat about how work eligibility works in the PMF, and that that you, in some cases, can be eligible for work without citizenship. But for the other 3, are there any opportunities that might be available without citizenship in the specific programs or across your organizations more broadly? In any order?
Not at GAO. You have to be a U.S. citizen.
Thanks, Deborah.
For TechCongress, you don't have to be a U.S. citizen. You also, you have to have work authorization. Unfortunately, because we're a small nonprofit, we're not able to sponsor visas. But if you have a visa that is, if you have a visa that doesn't expire before the end of the fellowship, you're also eligible. And also DACA recipients, or people who are eligible for DACA, are also encouraged to apply.
For STPF, it does require citizenship or dual citizenship, but I put into the chat, we work with about 30 other science societies that fund their own congressional fellowship placements, and they all manage their own eligibility, and so some do allow non-US citizens. And then I'm also going to share a crowdsourced Excel sheet that somebody shared with me that was other SciPol fellowships that don't require citizenship.
Thanks. So some great information and nuance from all 4 of you. There's certainly opportunities everywhere if you look into if you look into it. Since Jessica's up on the screen still here, Christian, were you available to ask your question directly to her?
Hi, Eric. Yes, I am. I guess what my question consisted of was, I have a background in public health and environmental health sciences, and I know I attended some of, the AAAS Fellowship sessions earlier, and they described that you could apply for either legislative, executive, and judicial. For somebody with my background, where would I be able to make the most impact in the government, and what branch? Or is that really not a question that you can answer right now?
Hi, Christian. Thank you for the question. And it is a great question. And it's one I think everybody asks themselves. And somebody can apply to 2 of the 3 branches that you just mentioned. I turned it around on you in the chat, Christian, because I was asking you, it's really, I think, about the impact that somebody might want to have as a fellow. So I think that a day as a fellow or a year as a fellow in an executive branch agency like the National Institutes of Health could look very different than somebody who wants to serve in a congressional office. You might be tackling different types of work, a different scope of topics, different day-to-day activities. And so I don't think one is better than the other. I think it's really about sussing out what a day is like and what aligns with how you'd like to spend that fellowship year.
Thank you.
All right, so Juan said he's still here. I know Juan was the first person to raise their hand, so I'm gonna go ahead and see Juan. Do you want to ask a question?
Hi, I'm just interested in finding positions that take chemistry majors, and also what are your acceptance rates for each program in an average year? How many people apply?
We can take that in no particular order if folks have a relevant answer.
Well, this is GAO, and we, in fact, recently had a couple of entry-level positions posted for chemistry majors, chemists. And we have a new office that we've been standing up that is continuing to grow called Science, see if I can remember, Science, Technology, Assessment, and Analytics, or Science, Technology, Analytics, and Assessment, one of those, STAA, and we are hiring a lot of people with science backgrounds, technology backgrounds to support that. I think we're looking at GAO, for those of you who were familiar with another old legislative branch agency, the Office of Technology Assessment, OTA. I think we are kind of taking on some of the roles and responsibilities that that office used to have. And we do get lots of applications for our internships, a lot, but we do hire a lot, and we offer the 3 different periods. So if you're interested in our internships, or once we have our entry-level positions, it's really important that you have all your materials together, even as much ahead of time as you can. The internships usually take a couple of weeks to fill, but our recent entry-level announcement was we reached our 600 application cap in like 2 days. So anyway, that's another reason just to, spend the weeks and months between now and when these different positions are available to work on your resume, to tweak it and get feedback on it from your career counselors, from your peers, from the Pmf Ambassadors. I think it's just a great opportunity to get that kind of feedback. And use this time wisely, so you're not rushing around in the middle of finals or other papers or working to get it done. Take advantage of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll chime in for the PMF kind of applicant to finalist pool. So we generally get anywhere between 5,000 to 7,000 applicants a year. And then from that pool of applicants, generally certify around 500 finalists. So it's about an 8% acceptance rate. Definitely do not allow that to deter you in any way from applying, because it's, also could be a bigger group of finalists this year, but that's generally what we see. And I would also just say, there are certain degree backgrounds that are heavily represented in PMF because we don't have control over, at the end of the day, what's represented in that finalist pool. So there's a lot of folks with law backgrounds. There's a lot of people with international affairs backgrounds. So if you happen to be in STEM, you mentioned chemistry, I think folks that come in and they have those backgrounds in STEM are actually at a great advantage in PMF because agencies are looking to hire those folks. And so you may be part of a smaller group within the finalist pool that actually has a STEM background. And so that's another great reason to apply. But that's kind of what it looks like for PMF.
Yeah, and I would jump in real fast with TechCongress. We usually receive about 250 to 300 applications. And depending on which fellowship program we're running right at the moment, we accept between 6 and 10. So this year's Congressional Innovation Scholars, our early career cohort, we've accepted 10, which is our largest class that we're fielding. We're really excited. They're currently talking with offices on the Hill right now to determine where they're going to be placed. But in terms of I think in terms of chemistry in particular, I think technologist has such a broad definition, right? Like we've had fellows who have gotten their PhD in genetics, and we've had fellows who got a master's in chemical engineering, and we've had fellows who have gotten masters in business analytics. So it's so wide, but I think going back to what I highlighted in the last question is we're really just looking for your ability to translate on these issues. So, translating, for example, our fellow Crystal Grant, who is placed with Senator Elizabeth Warren, she had gotten her PhD in genetics and became a fellow. And she worked with Senator Warren's office to write a letter to the CDC asking about how they displayed COVID mortality data and equity. And so, and because of that letter, they were able to get the CDC to change how they displayed data on COVID mortality for Black and Brown communities. So I would really encourage you to apply no matter what background you are. Technologist is such a broad term, and, these a lot of people in Congress just need help on how to navigate these issues.
Thanks, everyone.
Science allies. Yeah.
Also want to thank the panelists for answering some of the questions in the chat. That'll really help us get through everything, especially the more technical questions about timelines and things like that being handled in the chat, so we can chat some bigger picture things here. And on that kind of note, Lena, are you around to ask your question?
Yes, I am here, and thank you. I just was wondering because I have been working full time and going to school at the same time for my graduate degree. What would you say to somebody who's employed full time, but has always wanted to pursue a career in public policy? What is the advantage or disadvantage of participating in a program like yours?
Panel, over to you in no particular order.
I can go ahead and jump in first. So our fellowships are full-time, and what we aim to do through our fellowships is really reshape the arc of your career. So a lot of our fellows actually use our fellowships to pivot in their career. A lot of them are looking, to make an impact, to start, get involved in public service, and they want to serve their country. And so they're able to use the fellowship to really transition from maybe working in the tech sector or the private sector, and they can use it in working in the public sector. And we've had about 76% of our fellows, I would say, afterwards continue working in the government. About a third of our fellows stay on the Hill after and get hired full-time. About a third go and work in executive agencies. And then the other third, I would say, go back to the private sector or industry, and they work in roles where they can leverage their experience that they've gained in their fellowship to, work on policy or, ethics in Microsoft. And so that's a little bit just about what our fellowship can do for you.
Thank you.
At GAO, I think it's similar to that the explanation just provided about switching careers a little bit, but we do find to be completely transparent, sometimes there's a bit of a tension when we hire people who have a lot of experience to become into GAO either as an intern or into our entry-level program, because the entry-level program is entry level. So it's going to expose you to experiences and training and feedback that we would expect from all entry level people. Now, it doesn't mean that people with experience don't thrive and can manage it, but get promoted more quickly because of that additional experience. But sometimes there's this tension of, why am I here? I have all this experience. And even though it does put you on a different career track, sometimes coming at the entry level, even though you're more than qualified for it, you're overqualified. So there can be some tension there depending on the approach you take to the new opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's very helpful.
Oh, sorry, did I cut somebody off? Oh, to respond to Lena's question, so for PMF, one advantage is, you can apply fully online. It takes 2 to 3 hours from anywhere, right? Whether you're here in the US or overseas, doesn't matter. And then once finalists are announced, you have a full year to find your placement at a federal agency. So we have a lot of finalists who continue to work at their jobs wherever they're at while they're looking for opportunities to be placed as a PMF. The nice thing too about that is that PMFs can be placed initially at what's called the GS9, 11, or 12. And what level you come in at has to do both with your education and your work experience. So someone like you may, be able to get placed, Lena, at a higher level based on past work experience. So instead of coming in at a 9, you might come in at an 11 or at a 12. And so that's kind of another one of the advantages of coming in as somebody who does have significant past experience. But yeah, I would say, and this is probably true for a lot of these fellowships represented here, but there's no downside to applying to these fellowships. Just do it, apply to all of them, right? Because, you never know what kind of opportunities might end up in front of you once you do. But hopefully that helps kind of answer from the PMF perspective.
Thank you so much.
And to jump in from the AAAS S&T Policy Fellowships perspective, we welcome fellows from all career stages. The fellowship is meant to be service and learning. And so somebody can be a really seasoned scientist or engineer who's been in the field. We have somebody who's going to speak next month for us. He was an engineer at Ford Motor Company for 30 years, but he sees the opportunity for himself to do something different, to transition, to be challenged, and to give back with all of his expertise. And so I think there is that tension that Deborah was mentioning, and also this opportunity, depending on how you frame it, to really come in as an expert and to also learn. And just echoing also Brandon when he said, there is no downside to applying because you can withdraw, you can decline. If you are interested in this and curious about it, I think even just going through a process of applying and connecting and networking with people, that itself can be a growth opportunity for you and a good experience to go through, even if you never end up pursuing the fellowship.
So one of my my own original questions pairs well with one in the chat. I wanted to see if your programs learned any lessons during this pandemic, and if your programs would be potentially permanently altered, hopefully for the better in any way, based on what we've all been through. Dana, who cannot take the mic, also wanted to know if there are any virtual placement opportunities for PMF specifically. She was asking about, but for any of you who want to chime in, any changes or lessons from this virtual year, and might any virtual opportunities remain?
Deborah, you can go ahead. I saw you unmuted.
No, go for it. Go for it. I was just responding to a question in the chat, so go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so I think TechCongress was really lucky because we found we were able to scale up our operations during COVID. But I think one of the biggest lessons that we learned was that our fellows need additional support. And, a lot of what in DC, a lot of the networking goes on in happy hours or, like conferences. And these are all based in person. And so we were like, how can we step in and provide the support and the experience for our fellows while they're all working remotely? So we've done more regular check-ins, we've done, you know, happy hours, but we've also started a speaker series where we bring in experts from the industry, from academia or in policy, and they sit and they talk with our fellows, they talk about their career, and then fellows get the opportunity to ask them questions about what are they working on, what do they think about this issue, you know, whether they have career advice. And so it's really cool that we have this kind of like very intimate conversation with these leaders in these fields. So that's something that we started. And we've also started a networking event for folks from different science policy fellowships and technology policy fellowships, Coding It Forward, Lincoln Policy, who else? Like Lincoln Network, I think I might have already said it, but just a whole wide variety. We had a few folks join us from Australia's Government Tech Policy Fellowship in the last one. And it's really great because the fellows are able to get this experience of networking and grow their connections and, like, you know, think beyond our fellowship too, of what do I want to do afterwards and how can I get there? And so, yeah, I think going forward, we're going to find a way to keep these opportunities. I think in addition to hosting some in-person happy hours, we're going to continue doing a virtual networking event with all these fellowship opportunities, because you can connect with people from across the country and across the world and really, really better your expertise that way.
I think for GAO, we had a pretty robust telework program before COVID, and we were able to sort of ramp up pretty easily because of that. But our interns were not allowed to telework. So that's been, you know, a bit of a adjusting, and we're in fact doing what a good government, you know, accountability office will do, is evaluating and doing some self, soul searching about what, you know, could we allow, does it make sense to allow internships to continue virtually? Our fall internships will be virtual. It's what do we do beginning in January? Because of the, you know, like Lena said, that there's nothing beats the face-to-face. And even if you had allowed interns the choice, you know, would there be, you know, a lack of equity between the experiences and the face time you get from being virtual? That said, I'm a real proponent of allowing virtual internships because I think it just opens up our internships to a wide array of students, you know, students who couldn't either afford or don't want to, you know, can't relocate for either to one of our field offices or to our headquarters. So I'm hoping that we'll continue to have some virtual options for our internships, you know, moving post into 2022. We do have a volunteer intern program, which would be easier for us to make available remotely, and I'm going to push for that as nothing less. And that's the kind of thing you could do it as an internship for credit, or we provide the same opportunities for that. But again, it's volunteer, and it doesn't offer the same conversion options once you're done.
Yeah, so for PMF, almost all of our fellows that came on board last year came on virtually from all over the country. And many of them are still virtual. And I think that it's kind of a little bit of a wait and see for a lot of government opportunities. Agencies, as a matter of fact, have to submit their return to work plans to OPM or OMB within the next week or so. So we'll have a better sense of, you know, what that's going to look like going forward. On the plus side for you as people who are thinking about coming into public service, I think government has done a good job of really thinking through how are we not just returning to normal, but how are we going to get to a new normal? And a lot of folks have expressed, you know, liking the increased flexibility. Maybe there will be additional telework options and et cetera. So I think that, you know, we'll have a better sense over the next few months over what it will look like once we get back to normal, right? But there are definitely still agencies that are bringing folks on in a virtual capacity. And I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility in terms of PMF for those opportunities going forward as well.
And I can just share really quickly echoing, I think, some of what Alina was saying around, there's lessons learned around how this virtual and hybrid environment can be more inclusive that we'll want to keep related to our recruitment and our engagement with our fellows, such as the professional development we can offer them. It's easier to attend something like this than necessarily taking the metro to a physical office. I do also want to note that the fellowship is in the DC area, and so we do expect fellows to move to the DC area, and even though they're following the telework guidelines of their federal offices. And as Brendan was saying, we will see what the future holds for that.
Just one thing I just added to the chat that because we've been very DC focused in the conversation, is there are a ton of federal jobs outside of DC. And I don't remember what the latest partnership for public service numbers are, but it's more are located outside of DC than in DC. And you can set up filters on USA jobs to focus on certain geographic areas. And I'm sure with the PMF, there's a lot of agencies that have field regional offices across the country, and GAO has field offices across the country. So there are opportunities, there as well. So if you want to stay in Florida, you can limit it to that, that area. But also if you have family or friends or curious about other parts of the country, there are opportunities everywhere.
And the DC metro area is a fantastic place to live and work, if I do say so myself, as it is also important for our federal government employees to be around the beautiful country that they serve and represent. So as we enter our last 4 minutes here, I want to again thank our panelists for answering so many questions in the chat. We couldn't have gotten through all these without you. So I'm going to ask one closing question, and while the panelists answer, I'll ask if each panelist can also one more time in the chat put that one link that you want the students to have to the main FAQ page, application page to your program, in case they missed that earlier. And any other events coming up. I saw one of your 2 AAAS events, Jessica. I don't know if you posted also the Data and Democracy one, and I missed it. That looks really fun too. So students, monitor the chat for these amazing links that you don't want to miss about how to apply to these programs and how to get your questions answered in case any were not. And if each panelist can give one closing reflection about public service, what has drawn you to be in this current role of trying to improve the government and public service, and any broader advice you have for those that want to serve the country through a federal career. Alina?
Yeah, well, I'll just say that I grew up in a very collectivist culture. So it was all about, serving the community that you're with and how can you give back to others. And so that really inspired me to go into public service, helping to better my country and, better the people who live in it as well. And so I found that really rewarding to work towards this broader goal. And in terms of why you should go into public service, or opportunities available there, I would just say it's the impact. Something that we read about in so many of our applications, especially the last year, with COVID, is that people are just wanting to make an impact. People are wanting to make a difference, and it's what Brandon, Jessica, and Deborah have been saying as well. The government needs this expertise in order to function. I mean, a lot of people in government, there needs to be a lot more younger people in government. A lot of people, definitely not saying this as eloquently as I could, but trying to be inspiring. But I mean, we need young people in government, and they're the people who are going to drive this next generation. And so I would just inspire you to look into public service, to make this impact, to be a part of the change.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Alina. That was great. I think that, just to foot stomp what she said, it's the impact that you can have, right? That you can go into work every day and work on some of the most complex challenges that we're facing, and have a sense that you contributed to the solution, right? That you did something that mattered. And while you're not maybe going to take home the Silicon Valley or the Wall Street pay, you do have some great benefits and pretty good pay and security as well. Like those things are things to consider. I know that for me, that was a big deal coming in as a PMF and as a first generation college student. It was a way to have a really rewarding career and also like think about the security of my own future, right? So you can do kind of both of those things. And in terms of like that one piece of advice, I mean, I think, and I'm not sure we got to it in the questions, but I think it was in the pre-questions, just wanted to point out, a supervisor of mine at one point told me, you know, don't think about the title that you want to have or the position that you want to have. Think about the work that you want to do and the challenges that you want to confront as an individual based on your background, based on your experience, based on your perspective. And if you chase those challenges, like you're going to rise through the ranks in government and public service rather than chasing the promotions or the titles. And so if I could leave with one thing, I think I would mention that as well. But Alina's absolutely right. We need fresh talent, fresh perspectives in public service, and we need diverse perspectives as well. And so it's just a great opportunity right now, especially given all the complex, difficult things that we're facing as a country and as an international community. So that's my piece.
Both of you so far have mentioned the word impact, and FIU and DC's slogan is Impact Matters. So we clearly agree with you on that. Deborah, then Jessica, brief reflections on public service to close us out.
Sure. I'm just going to completely echo what Alina said about impact and making a difference. And I want to just build on real quick what Brandon, this is exactly what I was going to say about the little tidbit of advice. And I would do exactly what he said, but also to look at what energizes you. You know, where do you get excited about doing? And it's not necessarily what you're passionate about, because you can be passionate. I'm passionate about the environment, but you know, when it comes to in a work setting, what I really like doing is working with people and looking for ways to make my organization better. So I realized through different experiences I had what energized me, and I followed that path, and that created opportunities that I couldn't have anticipated. So think about that when you're doing your work. What kind of work, actual work? Do you like writing? Do you like working in groups? You know, or just it's the topic that drives you? You know, really think about what energizes you when you know, as you make your way through your career. And what energizes you is going to change. It might not be the same as when you get that graduate degree from where you are 5 years from now.
Very quick reflections. I will be a little bit subversive because I work for a nonprofit organization. And so even though this is about government service, I think that service can take many forms. And I think that the shared core is this mission, is this impact. You get to work with incredible, passionate people and do great work. And for those of you who are in the STEM field, you truly have expertise and knowledge that not everybody has, and it is desperately needed by our federal government. And so I hope you will think about bringing it and contributing it. And I think sometimes people talk about folks as future leaders, young leaders as future leaders. You're current leaders. You are currently leaders. And so thank you for what you are already doing, what you are already sacrificing to do what you're doing and study, and just keep carrying it forward.
Well, there's no way that I like to end a panel than on a note of subversiveness. So thanks for that, Jessica. And thank you to all four of you, Alina, Deborah, Jessica, Brandon, for taking your time a little bit after the workday here to share about your programs. As far as I know, we're all based in DC, so I hope to see you around town someday at receptions, events, invite me to anything you all are doing, and I hope that I can host you for a visit here for some cafecito at FIU in DC one day soon as well. Have a fantastic evening, everyone.
Great job. Great.
This
It was
great.
awesome.
Amazing session. Yeah.
I'm going to bed. I am so